Hello YouTube, welcome back to the conservatory. As you can see, I've had a bit of a busy morning. I've been cleaning and fitting stuff. So the first thing I've done, new front wheel, it's all been cleaned up. Obviously the ones that were on there beforehand were just something to keep it rolling, but these are going to be the finished wheels and tyres. So yeah, so we fitted those, fitted the front brakes and fitted the front master cylinder. I've also done the same at the rear, so again a matching rear tyre. These are BTO 90s and I've stuck with the original 18-inch rim. A lot of people on these track bikes, they do convert them to an NC29 rear rim to give you a better choice of tyres, but I quite like the old BTO 90s, they're a pretty good tyre. I've also stripped, cleaned and re-greased the linkages on the footrests and fitted the rear master cylinder. Unfortunately, whilst I was fitting the rear master cylinder, I came to fit this little bracket here and realised that I'd forgotten to helicoil the bolt hole here that needed doing. So, as is so often the way when you're building bikes, we've taken 2 steps forward and we have to take 1 step back, because I'm now going to have to remove the caliper, remove the wheel, and I'm hoping I can just hinge this subframe out the way. So let's get started. So by the magic of YouTube, everything is instantly moved out the way, and here is our offending hole. I remembered I'd stripped it, and obviously we were going to use the other swing arm which had a good thread in it, but I ended up reusing the original swing arm and completely forgot about this. So I've got a helicoil set. For those of you that don't know, here is a helicoil. So it's a tightly wound stainless steel spring, and the idea is you drill out the hole, re-tap it, take the helicoil and insert the helicoil in using a special tool. So it's not that special really, it's just a bent bit of bar with a slot in the end, and the helicoil fits on like that. So the first thing we need to do is drill our hole out and tap it. That's our hole drilled, and then here is the tap. Trickiest part is of course keeping it all square. And as with all taps, a couple of turns, back off half a turn and keep going. If, like this one's doing, you meet a bit of resistance, it doesn't hurt to back it off a couple of turns and try again, just to clear the swarf from the tap. There's our thread cut, and now we just insert the helicoil. And the idea is you want the helicoil to sit just below the surface, which is what this depth stop is for. And finally, on the helicoil itself, there is a little tang just in the bottom. We just need to knock that tang off. So very simply, spread it out, and hopefully now we can screw our bolt in. And there we are, one repair done. Before I properly refit it, I've just realised I forgot to repaint this little retaining bracket, so I'm not going to hook it up just yet. We'll take that out for a stripping and a painting. Right, let's get the rear wheel back in and get the subframe back in place. And now, back to the main objective for this video, which is bleeding the brakes. Obviously they've all been fully rebuilt. I've pushed the pistons all the way back in to try and expel as much air out of the caliper and out of the system as possible. And this is an area where people seem to have a bit of a problem, bleeding brakes. Now I've got myself a little easy bleed kit. They're relatively cheap from Halfords or online, and the nice thing about them is they have this little non-return valve in the end, which does seem to help. Obviously I have done it with just a tube going into a jam jar, that works fine. But yeah, normally when people do have problems with it, it's generally a sign that there's something wrong with your brake system, either be it the master cylinder being a bit worn, or there being something wrong with the calipers. Could even be that people haven't fully tightened up the banjo bolts and you've got an air leak. You'll soon see that though, because the fluid will find its way out at every opportunity. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom you in. We're going to do the rear caliper first, and then I'll move the bike round and we'll do the fronts. Okay, before we start, it might be worth talking about brake fluid itself. Brake fluid comes in a range of grades, if you like. And they've all got a dot number on them. So the lowest grade that you'll probably find, if you can find it, is dot 3. And that's a mineral based fluid, and that's the sort of stuff that your granddad probably put in his Morris Minor or his Morris Marina, depending on how old your granddad is. You don't really see it very much. The next grade up is this, dot 4, and that seems to be the industry standard these days, and it's the one that most automotive suppliers stock. Then it gets a little bit confusing, because the next grade up is dot 5. Now dot 5 is actually a silicon based fluid rather than a mineral based fluid, and it's very popular with car restorers and hot rodders and the like, because being silicon based, it doesn't suffer from the big drawback that ordinary brake fluid suffers from, and that is ordinary brake fluid is hygroscopic, which means it absorbs water. Now dot 5, being silicon based, it doesn't perform any better than dot 4, but it doesn't absorb water. The only problem with using dot 5 is, unless you've completely stripped and rebuilt your entire brake system, you can't mix it with dot 4. So if you've had dot 3 or dot 4 in your system previously, unless you replace every single component, so that strip, clean, rebuild the calipers, the master cylinder, and fit new brake lines, the dot 5 will react with the dot 4. and I think it sort of forms a gel, starts blocking things up. So for that reason I'm going to stick with dot 4. There is another grade, and that's what racers tend to use, and that's dot 5.1. Should really have been called dot 6, because like dot 3 and dot 4, it's a mineral based fluid again. So you can use it in a system that has had dot 4. So if you're looking to do a real upgrade and go proper racer, then dot 5.1 is probably the fluid you want to be using. Obviously this is only a little 400, it's not going to be that hard on the brakes, so I'm just sticking with the standard dot 4. Now as you'll see, I've replaced the original rear brake feed, master cylinder feed, with this short length tubing. You can get the HRC tubes, but this is just a length of clear Tygon tube. Now obviously if this was a standard one, we'd have a tube that would go all the way up to about here, and there'd be the brake reservoir up there. Plenty of fluid in the system to bleed through. Unfortunately with a stubby little hose like this, it doesn't give you a lot of fluid in reserve for bleeding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this funnel, put it in, and I'm just going to lightly tighten up the Jubilee clip to make sure that we don't get any leaks. And hopefully that should now act as a nice big reservoir for me. Anything that's left over at the end we can just pour out. Now, just to be on the safe side, I am going to just fit a cable tie on here, because the last thing I want to do is tip brake fluid everywhere. One of the other issues with brake fluid is it's very, very good at dissolving paint and pretty much anything it comes into contact with. That's not to say you can use it as a paint stripper, because it will leave a nasty oily residue on whatever it is that it's got onto. So there's our fluid in the reservoir, and now we just move over to the bleed nipple. Take the plastic cover off, I'm going to remove it completely so it's out of the way. 8mm spanner. And connect up our easy bleed. Now I've sat the easy bleed in this old washing up bowl because I've had it so long. It's actually started to crack around the top and tends to leak, and I don't really want brake fluid everywhere. So I'm just going to give the brake pedal a couple of pumps to get things primed. Open the bleed nipple, literally a quarter of a turn. Keep pumping. And this may take a little while just to get the system primed. But you'll see that the fluid will come through fairly soon. You can see there's some bubbles coming up through the tube here, which means that the master cylinder is starting to fill up fluid. We're getting rid of all the air out of the master cylinder, and then we've just got to remove all the air from the rest of the system. Always keep an eye on your fluid in your reservoir, make sure you don't run out of fluid. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold the pedal down, open your bleed nipple. Close the bleed nipple and release the pedal. And already I can start to feel resistance building up in the system, so that's good. That means the fluid is coming through, and there it is. You can just see the fluid come out through the hose. And I can really start to feel resistance building up, and you can actually see the caliper is now, the pistons come out and the pads are now gripping onto the brake disc. And what we want to do is we just want to keep repeating the process until there's no air bubbles coming out through the bleed nipple. The only downside with this is it does make your arm ache after a while, but you should feel the pressure build up in the pedal. You can see now I can only move it, well, probably about 2 or 3 centimetres, whereas beforehand it was moving about 5 or 6. And I think we're almost there. Yep, that's all coming through clear, and I've got a nice firm brake pedal. So that's the rear done. That was quite easy. Let's see if the fronts are going to be the same. I suspect not, because obviously we've got 2 hoses to worry about on the front rather than just the one. What you will find is when you disconnect the hose, there will be a little bit of fluid stuck in the nozzle, in the bleed nipple even, not the nozzle. So I'm just going to take a little bit of rag, twist it into a point and just insert it in there to remove this unwanted fluid. I did once get caught out when I went to tech inspection, and I'd just bled the brakes that morning, and there was fluid all around here, and the inspector went, you've got a leaky nipple. Turned out what it was I'd bled the system, and it was in between the time from wheeling it from my gazebo to the tech stand, all this fluid had come out, giving the impression that it leaked. We just cleaned it up, pumped the brake a few times, and I demonstrated that it wasn't a leaky nipple. It was just me being a little bit clumsy. Alright, so that is the rear done. Now the hard part, trying to tip the fluid back into the bottle without spilling it everywhere. But we used a lot less fluid than I was expecting. going to do is I'm actually going to pump a little bit more fluid through the system, because you actually want a bit of an air gap in the reservoir, and that allows the fluid to move up and down. As with any sort of hydraulic system, the fluid itself isn't compressible, but any air in the system is. So if you leave the pipe fully topped up to the brim and then seal it with the cap, that becomes locked and the brake pedal won't work. So I'm just going to pump some through till I get the level down to about there, and that'll give me a nice little air gap in there, which is annoying because having just cleaned up the brake nipple, we're going to have to do it again, but never mind. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually pushed a little bit too much in. That is the problem with these tube systems. There is so little fluid in the reservoir, it's a real pain to get it just right. There we go, I'm happy with that now. Obviously, as the pads start to wear down, this fluid level will drop, so we will have to keep an eye on that whilst I'm riding the bike, and just give it a little top up every now and again. But that's a small price to pay, really. Okay, well, I'm going to move the bike round, and we'll move on to the fronts. Right, so I've spun the bike round, and now we'll do the fronts. Like I said, this may prove to be a little bit more difficult because obviously you've got 2 hoses and 2 calipers to do that are linked at the top here. But let's see how it goes. Now, I was talking about the leaving the expansion gap, and you can see here's the cap and inside it is the rubber, and that's why you've got this bit of rubber that's able to deform and move out to take up that airspace. So we're already catered for on the front, but obviously we just needed to allow for it at the rear. There are various schools of thought as to whether you should bleed the caliper nearest to the master cylinder or the one furthest from the master cylinder first. I kind of work on the theory that if I get this line all solid and free of air, then it's going to be much easier to do the longer line if you haven't got to worry about this. But what I generally do is I bleed this one through first, then bleed this one through, and then I'll probably come back and just do a double check on this side. Whether I really need to do that or not, I don't know, but for the sake of a little bit of brake fluid, it does give you the extra peace of mind. So let's get the brake fluid in. Put it somewhere where I won't trip over it. And you could hear a little burp of air come through, so that's good. Now you can try leaving the brake nipple just literally slightly cracked and see if you can pump fluid through, but that doesn't seem to be working in this case. So let's revert back to the couple of pumps. Turn. As I said, it does take a little while to get the air displaced from the system and get the fluid to work its way through. You just have to be patient and accept that it's going to make your wrist ache after a while. You don't want to go too fast, just some nice gentle strokes. That all sounded vaguely pornographic. If you've got adjustable levers like these ones, it helps to put them on the widest span setting so you can have a really good pull, get full movement through the master cylinder. Okay, so I've been pumping fluid through. We're getting fluid through with very few air bubbles now, so I'm fairly confident that I've got this brake line all more or less air free, but still not getting enough pressure in the system to start retracting or pushing out the pistons. So what I'm going to do is we'll disconnect this side and then move round to the other side. Around a bit so you can see what's going on. And also I've turned the handlebars round, not just so that you can actually see the caliper on the camera, but also by turning the handlebars, what it does is it raises the bleed nipple slightly. So it is very definitely the highest point of the caliper. Here goes the other side. I'm just going to give the caliper body a little tap with the back of the screwdriver, and what that does is if there are any air bubbles trapped in the basket, it does help. Well, we have fluid coming out. There doesn't seem to be many air bubbles, but still the pistons aren't operating, which isn't a good sign. So I'm wondering if this aftermarket Chinese lever is actually preventing us getting a full stroke on the master cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I've got an original Honda lever. I'm going to try fitting that and see if that gives us better results. As you can see, I've replaced the little dogleg Chinese lever with an original Honda part. Still been pumping fluid through. It does seem to be pumping a bit of fluid through, but I'm just not getting any pressure built up. So I thought I'd do all the usual checks. So I've gone round, check the tightness on all the banjos, on the calipers and on the master cylinder. And so I'm going to try another little trick that can often work. So what I've got is a bit of 1/2 inch plywood, which just about fits between the pads, and I've just clamped it to the frame here, and I've removed the left hand caliper, and I'm just sitting it on the bit of plywood. So what that means now is the caliper is actually above the master cylinder, so any air is naturally going to flow upwards and into the caliper. So let's see if that has made any difference. And of course, sod's law, I've spilt brake fluid on the floor, but soon mop that up. So move the handy dandy little workbench over. And let's reconnect everything. Oh, that's better. We weren't getting air bubbles like that before. So sometimes this is a nice little trick that often helps, is to say, raise the caliper up above the master cylinder, and you can see that's really making a difference to the amount of air that's coming out. So, fingers crossed. This solves our little problem. Like I said, it's a nice little trick. Don't often have to resort to it, but it usually works when you do. And obviously I've got to do the same to the other caliper. Just take it off, lift it up, and do the same. But I'm just going to wait till we're getting clear fluid through this caliper. I suppose it would have all been pretty boring if it had all worked first time, and of course I wouldn't have got to show you this little trick. So let's take that as a bit of a blessing. Alright, that caliper seems to be running pretty clear of air now, so I'm going to switch you off while I do the same with the other caliper. And fingers crossed we'll get there in the end. Well, we're back. Clearly the trick of raising the calipers actually worked and got rid of the last of the air in the system. I've got a nice firm brake lever now. That feels really good, and obviously aside from the cable running on it, that's all working well. So we've covered a few little old school tricks. As I said, when you're bleeding them, try and turn the handlebars across in the opposite direction to the caliper you're bleeding. Raise the nipple to the highest point, and then 5 or 6 good strong pumps. Release the nipple, bleed it through, close the nipple, release the lever. Usually works. Obviously this took a little bit more effort because it was a completely empty system to start off with, and yeah, if you do find that you just can't bleed it, you could try the trick of cable tying the lever back to the handlebar for a while, see if that forces things through, and then if that doesn't work, well, you can see the little trick, bringing the calipers up above the level of the master cylinder so all the air will rise. certainly worked, and it certainly helped. I think what was happening is the piston was moving backwards and forwards before it's contacting the disc. So by putting the thicker bit of plywood in, the pistons were actually hitting something solid when you were pumping, rather than moving backwards and forwards and not compressing the air. So there you are. There's a couple of things to look out for when your bleeding breaks. Normally they're nowhere near this trouble. I think it is just because we had a completely rebuilt master cylinder. Lines were on with air in them, and obviously completely rebuilt. Calipers themselves, again, full of air, no fluid in there, and it just took a little bit of while and effort to get everything through. But as you can see, I've got a nice firm lever. I'm in two minds about this one. We'll see. I kind of quite like them. But as you can see, yeah, no, it's not much worse than the standard lever. So they might go back on, they might not. We'll see how it goes in due course. But yeah, so took a bit longer than we expected, as is my waffling at the moment. But thanks for watching. Hope you find it all helpful, and see you in the next one.